So let's recall the prayer of the four immeasurables that we just recited and review them in our mind and try to really generate the thought, the feeling, the attitude expressed in this prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, which are virtuous ways of behaving, ethical conduct, and also positive states of mind like love and compassion. So may all beings have these continuously. And may all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Those are unethical ways of behaving, non-virtuous actions like killing, stealing, and so forth. And also unwholesome states of mind, the afflictive emotions like anger, greed, ignorance, arrogance, and so on. So may they be completely free from those. And may all sentient beings never be separated from the pure happiness of good rebirths in their future lives and eventually the highest states of happiness possible, liberation and enlightenment. And may all sentient beings be free of the chief afflictive emotions of attachment that holds some close, clings to them, and aversion that pushes some away with aversion, hatred, even harmfulness. And may they have equanimity, an even-minded, caring attitude towards all beings without exception. So we can't expect these wishes to happen all at once. It will take time. So we need great courage and determination to keep generating these beautiful positive states of mind and then working to actualize them, make them happen as much as we can. But it does take time. And there's a beautiful verse in this text by Shantideva that His Holiness repeats every day, recites and meditates on every day, and it's good for us to learn it as well. It goes, as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, that long will I too remain in order to dispel the misery of the world. So may that be our motivation for joining this session this morning, listening to, learning about the teachings of Shantideva, teachings of the Buddha actually, all the great Buddhist masters from the time of the Buddha until today. May this help us to get closer to enlightenment so that we can help all living beings. So what I thought to do this morning, our last session of the retreat, is to finish the section on the four close placements of mindfulness. There's just a few verses left in that section. And then I thought it would be nice to read through together the last verses from 151 to 167, the last verses of this chapter. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says they're really good to read, and they kind of show the connection between wisdom of emptiness and compassion. And I will try to take, if there's time left, take care of any last questions, although, yeah, I still have a lot of questions sent earlier, which there just isn't time to take care of all of them. We'll do as many as we can. So the section we were going through yesterday, we started looking at the close placement of mindfulness of feelings. And it's a tough one. I had trouble understanding it myself. Made me also realize there's a lot about feelings that I don't really understand, how they work and so on. But I started reading this book called The Way of Awakening. It's based on a commentary that was given to the whole text, Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds, by a Lama named Geshe Yeshe Topten. And it was given in Italy back in the 80s, I think. And so they made it, he taught the whole text, and they made it into a book. And first it was in Italian, and then thanks to Richard Gere, who sponsored it, it was translated into English. So now we have this wonderful English version of it. And I had the fortune to meet Geshe Yeshe Topten in Dharamsala because he, of course, did all his studies, completed his studies, and became a Geshe, which usually takes about 20 years or more. And then he spent quite a few years living in retreat in the mountains above Dharamsala. And so I remember seeing him, but I'm not sure if I ever got teachings from him. But he was greatly renowned and respected, and so on and so forth. So anyway, I found reading his explanation quite helpful. So I'll read some of it to you about the close placement of mindfulness on feelings. So he says, feelings are also not truly existing or inherently existing, because if they were, they would be permanent. Now, I don't know if that's so clear to everybody, but the reasoning is, if something was truly existing or inherently existing, that means it would stand by itself. It would exist by itself, and it wouldn't be dependent on anything else. It would be totally cut off from everything else. Nothing could affect it. Nothing could change it. And so it would never change. It would always stay the same. That's the reasoning behind that. A feeling of joy would last forever. Wouldn't that be great? And the same would apply to an unpleasant feeling. Oh, that wouldn't be so great. In reality, feelings change and are not permanent. And this demonstrates their non-true existence, or lack of intrinsic existence, lack of inherent existence. If feelings were truly existent, each time we experienced a feeling of suffering or mental unhappiness, we would not be able to experience pleasant feelings anymore, and vice versa. So whatever feeling we have, we'd be stuck in that feeling forever, and it would never change. The feeling of suffering does not exist intrinsically, and neither does the feeling of happiness, because one can arise when the other ceases. When we enjoy good food, we experience a feeling of pleasure in the taste. But if this feeling of pleasure were truly or intrinsically existent, each time we ate that very food, we would experience an identical feeling of pleasure. In reality, this is not so, as in the case of a person whose father has just died and does not enjoy eating good food as he normally does. So we probably all had that experience when we lose a loved one, someone very, very important to us, very close to us, when that person dies, and our mind is just kind of overwhelmed by this feeling of sadness and grief, and we may not even feel like eating at all. We have no interest in eating food, but even if we do try to eat food, we probably don't enjoy it. Even our favorite food that we normally love, but it's just like, it's tasteless. There's no pleasure there. So we probably all had that experience. If the feeling of pleasure existed naturally or intrinsically, it would exist forever. Whereas as soon as a feeling of suffering arises, the feeling of pleasure ceases. So we can see that in our experience, that pleasant and unpleasant feelings come and go. Sometimes we have pleasant ones and then they disappear, replaced by unpleasant ones, and vice versa. So that shows they are not inherently or intrinsically existing. And he also talks about how, I'm kind of putting my own words in this, but when we do have a pleasant experience, like with eating food, I think most people like to eat food, so there's certain types of food, when we see them there, oh, we get kind of excited, even before we've even tasted them. There's this anticipation that there'll be pleasant sensation, pleasant feeling when we eat that food. And we might even tend to think that the pleasure is inherent in the food. Without thinking about it, without analyzing it. It almost seems as if the food is inherently pleasurable. Yeah, and it comes from the food into us. Do you ever notice that? Does it seem like that? That's why we get attached. We get attached to that food because we think, oh yeah, if I eat that, it's going to give me pleasure. And often it does, but again, not always. If the food was inherently or intrinsically pleasurable, every time we eat that food, we would experience pleasure. But that isn't the case, like in the case of when you're really in a state of grief or depression or whatever, then even you eat that food, but it doesn't give you pleasure. Also, sometimes we just get off certain types of food, We might really enjoy them for a while, and after a while, maybe we overdid it. We don't enjoy it anymore. So again, that shows the pleasure isn't coming from the food, but it's something arising from within ourselves, causes and conditions inside our own mind. And also, if a certain type of food was inherently or intrinsically pleasurable, everybody would enjoy it. Everybody would get pleasure from that food, but that's obviously not the case. The kind of food we really enjoy, somebody else goes, yuck, and vice versa. The reason that the same food at times gives pleasure to some, while at other times, or to someone else, it does not, is that the pleasant characteristic associated with its flavor does not exist intrinsically. Another example is the fact that some people like black coffee while others do not. This is very appropriate in Italy. People are just so into their espresso. Yeah. Feeling, too, is therefore a designation made by the conceptual mind and does not exist intrinsically. The mind that grasps at feeling as being intrinsically existent generates attachment. And for this reason, we must meditate on the lack of intrinsic existence of feelings and acquire the yogi's understanding of the way in which all phenomena exist, supporting this with a nourishment of meditative absorption that arises from unifying calm abiding with superior view. We depend on food for the sustenance of our physical body, and likewise, in order to develop the capabilities of a yogi, we depend on the meditation of shamatha and vipassana, calm abiding and special insight. So that's the nourishment of yogis, although most yogis also need to eat food. But good to do it without attachment. So anyway, those are just some of the things he said that I found kind of helped to clarify the things we were talking about yesterday. So the next couple of verses are continuing with this exploration of feeling and trying to see if it exists inherently or not. And this section is also difficult. We'll try to go through it. And these next verses explore a kind of question or issue. If feeling was inherently existing, then it should be experienced as such. There would be a mind, a consciousness that is able to experience feeling as inherently existing. So what kind of mind is that? What kind of mind is able to know feeling as inherently existing? And he looks at three possibilities. Is it a mind that is simultaneous with that feeling? Or is it a mind that preceded it or that comes after it? So verse 99 says, even though they, in brackets, sense objects, are seen or touched due to a nature similar to a dream or illusion, because they are generated simultaneously with the mind, feelings are not seen by it. So what he's saying here is that with regard to sense objects, like the table, our bodies, roses, food, and so forth, these are objects that can be seen with our eye consciousness, they can be touched with our tactile consciousness, and so on. But they are empty of true existence. They are like dreams or illusions. So they appear truly existing, but they don't exist that way. So there's this false way of appearing. So we looked at that before, of things don't exist inherently, although we probably still have a long way to go before we realize that. But anyway, he's saying, so then, since the sense objects themselves do not exist inherently, independently from their own side, feelings that arise in relation to sense objects are also empty of inherent existence. And then he starts to question, what mind perceives feelings? What part of our mind perceives feelings? When he first looks at the one that's simultaneous with it. So, just for those who are not familiar with lower reiki, the explanation of mind and mental factors, with each, so we have 6 types of main minds or primary minds related to our 6 senses: seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and then the mental consciousness. So anytime we have any of those types of experience, seeing, hearing, and so forth, up to the mental consciousness, thinking or remembering, so that experience is composed of a main mind or primary mind, one of the 6 types of consciousnesses. And then together with that main mind, there are always a number of mental factors. And they all come together in one package. They say it's like the hand. You know, the main mind is like the base of the hand, the main part of the hand. And then the mental factors are like fingers. They're all stuck together and they function together. They work together to know the object, to experience the object. And there are some mental factors that are always there. They accompany every single main mind. Feeling is one of those. So every time, it's like the thumb maybe, every time we have a main mind, there's always the feeling accompanying it. And knowing the object as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral in between. So what he's asking here is, what mind experiences feeling? What mind knows the feeling? Is it the mind that's simultaneous with it, the main mind that is, together with it, part of the same package? Now, conventionally, that is correct, as far as I understand, and I also read it in Geshe Thupten's book, Thupten's. It's this mind that is simultaneous with the feeling that experiences the feeling, conventionally. But if we're talking about true existence, inherent existence, that this main mind is inherently existing and the feeling is inherently existing, that doesn't work. That wouldn't be possible. This is a little complicated. I'll try to explain it as I understand it, but it might be hard to understand. So what they say in the philosophical teachings is, in order for a mind to experience an object, they have to have a relationship. There has to be a relationship between the two. And in Buddhist philosophy, they say there are 2 kinds of relationships. 2 kinds of relationships between objects. One is a cause and effect relationship, where one is the cause and the other is the effect. That's one type of relationship. And in a cause and effect relationship, the two things can't occur simultaneously. The cause always has to come first, and the effect has to come afterwards. Like with the seed and the sprout, that's the easiest example of that. Because first we have the seed, and then at the time when the seed is there, there's no sprout. But if the seed is put in the right conditions with soil, well, you don't even need soil. Like if you're making sprouts to eat, to put in your salad, all you need is water. You need water and the right kind of environment. So with the water, the moisture, the seed will transform and turn into a sprout. And when it's a sprout, it's no longer a seed. I think there's another, anyway. So the seed turns into the sprout. So there's a cause and effect relationship and a time difference between the time of the seed and the time of the sprout. So that's one type of relationship. So in the case of a primary mind, main mind, and the feeling that accompanies it, they can't have that kind of relationship because they occur at the same time. They can't be cause and effect. Another reason they can't be cause and effect is because if we're talking about a main mind, we're talking about, because for two things to be cause and effect, they have to relate to each other. They have to depend on each other. The effect depends on the cause. It arises from the cause. But also in Prasangika, they also say the cause depends on the effect, in the sense that we can only call it a cause if there is an effect that comes from it. Like with a mother and a child. A mother is only a mother is only a mother because she has a child. If there's no child, she can't be called a mother. In the same way, you can't call something a cause if it doesn't bring about an effect. So cause and effect depend on each other. So if we're talking about a truly existing cause and a truly existing effect, that's impossible because they can't depend on each other. If they were truly existing, they have to be totally separate, totally independent. No relationship, no connection. So in the context of true existence or inherent existence, cause and effect is impossible. So I think that's the reasoning here, that the mind and the feeling cannot have that kind of relationship. One, because they're cause and effect, but one, because they're supposedly truly existing. They couldn't depend on each other. But also because they're simultaneous. That's as I understood it. But there's probably...
I get that in terms of talking about inherently existent main minds or inherently existent feelings, that all makes sense. What doesn't make sense to me is what does make sense to me is that you have a contact with something, and that contact has a main mind that might be visual. But the feeling associated with that contact seems like it would be, there is at the moment of that contact, there is feeling in the mind. But seems like the feeling that gets generated from that contact would happen in the next moment.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about yesterday. I think Venerable Pema asked about that.
Yeah, so how can you say they're simultaneous?
Well, moment by moment by moment by moment, every single moment we have a main mind and a number of mental factors. And the ever-present mental factors are feeling, contact, intention, attention, and discrimination. So those are occurring every single moment. And so if you were to isolate each moment of mind, you would have, a main mind and then these 5 mental factors. It's complicated, but they say, the contact is the cause of a perception. Okay, it brings together the object, the sense power, and the consciousness. So the contact let's say we have moment A and moment B. Moment A, the contact of moment A is actually bringing together the three conditions for the main mind of moment B. Okay, and then in moment B, you have a main mind and the feeling accompanying that. So they're actually the result of the contact of moment A. But in moment B, there's still a contact. There's a contact in that moment as well. And then that is bringing together the conditions for the main mind and the feeling of moment C. And so on, it goes like that. That's how you explain that seeming discrepancy. But I think if you start to analyze that even further, you could probably get into some tricky things. But don't expect me to. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay. Like I say, when I'm looking into this and trying to understand it, I realize, oh, there's a lot of things I don't fully understand about the mind and the mental factors and feeling as well. So it seems to be quite, and I did try to find explanations for some of my doubts in the various commentaries, but none of them really went into depth with it. So I think it's something in the too hard basket. The other possible kind of relationship that can occur, so again, there are two kinds of relationship. One is cause and effect. The other kind of relationship that there can be between objects is same nature, one nature. And the meaning of same nature is two or more things arise together, abide together, and cease together. So an easy example would be, a piece of cloth, like this piece of cloth, yellow piece of cloth, and the yellow color of it. So the yellow piece of cloth and its color, yellow, come into existence at the same time, abide together, and cease together. If the cloth is burnt or torn up into shreds and is no longer cloth, then the yellow color of the cloth will also go out of existence. Another example, like we've been talking about here, is a conventional truth and the ultimate truth of that, the emptiness of that. So like the table, for example, when the table is a conventional truth, it was made in a workshop somewhere. So when it came into existence, became a table, the emptiness of inherent existence of the table also came into existence and will abide with the table as long as it exists. They abide together inseparably. But when the table is destroyed, if it's burned in a fire or chopped up for whatever, firewood, hopefully that won't happen. It's a nice table. But you never know. I mean, nothing, things like tables don't last forever. So one day it will go out of existence. And when it goes out of existence, the emptiness of the table will also go out of existence. So it's said that the table and the emptiness of the table are one nature, or one entity. They use those terms. So that's the other possible kind of relationship. And here so if we're saying, does the mind that's simultaneous with the feeling, those two things, can they have that kind of relationship of one nature? And all I could find about that was in the commentaries, they say they cannot be the same nature because they're different substances, and different substances that are concurrent are unrelated. And I didn't find any further explanation of that, so please don't ask me. Even the Geshis and the Gyaltsabje and so on didn't explain it. They just said that full stop. So, yeah, maybe we can explore that later in a future. Yeah. Okay, so he's checking to see if the mind concurrent or simultaneous with the feeling, if those two things can have the same nature, can be the same nature, have that kind of relationship. And the only thing I could find explaining that was the sentence, because different substances that are concurrent are unrelated. So that seems to mean that They are two different substances. The mind, the main mind, and the feeling accompanying it are two different substances, and they are concurrent, so they cannot have a relationship of one nature. But I don't really understand what that means, so we'll just leave that. Just leave it there. Maybe the next time we have a Geshe coming here, or we have a chance to talk to a Geshe, like maybe Geshe Damdo, we can ask him what that means. But yeah. Anyway, the point that Shantideva is trying to make is that the mind that is simultaneous with the feeling, they're part of the same package, existing simultaneously. That if we're talking in the context of inherent existence or true existence, then that mind cannot experience that feeling. That's the point he's trying to make, but I don't fully understand how we get to that point. The next one is easier. The next verse, 100. So here he's looking at the possibility of the mind that comes before the feeling or the mind that comes after the feeling. Are they able to know the feeling in the context of inherent existence? So he says, also, due to being generated before or after them, it remembers them but does not experience them. They do not experience their own natures, nor are they experienced by others. Okay, so first looking at the mind that exists before the feeling, so one moment before the feeling or any time before the feeling, can that mind know the feeling? No, it's not possible because the feeling hasn't yet arisen. So how can a mind that comes before it know it? It hasn't happened yet. Then, what about a mind that comes afterwards, after the feeling? So he's saying that cannot experience the feeling, it can only remember it, because the feeling is already past, feeling is already gone. So that mind can only remember it, recall it, but not experience it in a direct way. That's how I understand that. So the mind before the feeling or the mind after the feeling cannot know the feeling. Can remember it, yes, but that's not the same as knowing it directly, experiencing it directly. Then he's asking, can a feeling experience itself? And the answer to that is no. Now, this is a whole other argument that I think came earlier, but we skipped over it, one of the verses we skipped over. But it's one of the reasonings against the Yogacara Chittamatra school, because they say that they assert something called self-cognition, self-awareness, self-knowers, a mind that's able to know itself. And Prasangika says, no, that is not possible. In the same way that a sword can't cut itself, and a finger can't touch itself. Try to do that. I mean, you can maybe touch the top of your finger to the bottom of your finger if they're long enough, but the point is the tip of the finger. Can the tip of the finger touch the tip of the finger? So that's not possible. And a sword can't, or a knife can't cut itself. So they say in the same way, a mind cannot know itself. That very mind cannot know itself. It can only be known by another mind. Now, this is actually one of the questions somebody had asked about, self-cognizers that are refuted by the Prasangika school. What about self-awareness? Don't we have self-awareness? So yes, we do. We do have the ability to look at our own mind and know what's happening in our mind, what kind of thoughts are happening, what kind of emotions are happening. We have to be able to do that so that we can work on our mind. But that is done by the mental factor of introspection. So introspection is a mental factor. So it's one of the many mental factors that operate in our mind, and it has the ability to observe the mind itself. and know what kind of thoughts we have, what kind of emotions we have, and so on. But a self-cognizer is something different than introspection. It's a different kind of thing. So it gets complicated, but to understand this, you need to look at low-rig, study low-rig. That's where it's explained. So anyway, according to Prasangika, feeling cannot experience itself. So the conclusion is an inherently existing feeling. This is what we're trying to understand. If there was such a thing as an inherently existing feeling, what knows that? It cannot be known by another mind, either before or after or simultaneous with it, and it cannot be known by itself. It does seem to me that conventionally, the mind accompanying feeling, the main mind that's at the same time as feeling, that mind does experience feeling, but it doesn't do so in an inherently existing way, in a truly existing way. Because if you're bringing in inherent existence or true existence, things cannot have any kind of relationship, any kind of connection. So it would not be possible for such a mind and a truly existing mind to know a truly existing object. So that's my understanding, but I just want to read a little bit more from Geshe-Geshe Tokten to sort of maybe ease our mind in all this confusion. It says, the aim of meditating on the non-true existence of feelings is to understand that object, feeling, and the consciousness that experiences feelings do not truly exist. That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to get to. In this way, we eliminate the cause of conditioned existence. Yeah, because it's the ignorance that grasps at things as inherently existing that keeps us in samsara, keeps us in this unsatisfactory situation. If we are able to understand the non-true existence of feelings, we will no longer generate attachment towards pleasant ones, and by not having attachment, we will no longer be tied to cyclic existence. At present, we crave the experience of pleasant feelings because we grasp at their true existence. But instead, we should strive to perceive everything we see and hear as a dream. So that's the whole point of this section. And maybe with time we'll be able to understand them. And I read something else here that I found quite comforting. He said, the subject discussed here is particularly difficult, both for me, who's explaining it, and for you who are listening. So that was comfortable. Even a Geshe who studied all those years and meditated all those years, he still finds it difficult. So we shouldn't feel so bad. We are nevertheless making an effort and will succeed in the end in acquiring some understanding in order to develop the wisdom that realizes the authentic mode of existence of phenomena. We cannot neglect study and reflection on their nature. This is the only way to attain liberation and Buddhahood. These cannot be achieved by any other means, neither by airplane nor spaceship. So we have to go through study and reflection, and slowly, 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 these things will make more sense. Even just thinking that this text, the Bodhicharyavatara, contains something useful to understand, contributes to the elimination of ignorance. And by merely listening to the teachings on the emptiness of true existence of phenomena, even if we do not believe in this reality, can help us to dispel the ignorance that perceives the true existence of phenomena. So just whatever, I've heard this many times from my teachers, they say whatever effort we make to try to understand emptiness, read books about it, listen to teachings on it, think about it, discuss it, and so on, even if we find it very confusing and we feel like we don't understand what's going on, but slowly, slowly, those are leaving imprints on our mind, and slowly, 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 those imprints will add up, and eventually we'll get more clarity. So we need that kind of encouragement to keep going, even when it's tough. Yeah, so it does seem this section on feelings is difficult. The last verse in this section is number 101, and it says, "There is no one who feels, hence feelings are not reality. Thus, due to this, what damage is there to this selfless collection?" So what this means is there's no inherently existing person, I, who has feelings, who feels things, and there's no inherently existing feeling. So how could feeling affect this collection of aggregates that is devoid of a real self? How could pleasurable feelings benefit this collection of aggregates? And how could painful feelings harm them? So since there's no inherently existing person, I, body, mind, aggregates, I mean, of course, it takes time to get there, but once you do have that experience, you can see that pleasant feelings do not benefit this empty person, and painful feelings do not harm them. So we shouldn't be attached to feelings. That's the conclusion, not to be attached to our feelings. So the next couple of verses are about the close placement of mindfulness of minds. And the commentaries say mind here refers to the six main consciousnesses, the six primary consciousnesses related to our six senses. So we're exploring those to see if they exist inherently or not. So it's in the translation we have, they're using the term mentality. It's yi in Tibetan, but again, it's explained as the six main minds. So verse 102 says, "The mentality does not abide in the powers, not in forms and so forth, nor amidst them. The mind is not inside, outside there is none, and is also not found somewhere else." So again, we're trying to find whether there's such a thing as a mind that is inherently existing, truly existing. Mind does exist conventionally, but does it exist truly, inherently, independently, something real from its own side? If such a mind existed, we should be able to find it. We're saying if we look for it in the sense powers, like our eye sense power, ear sense power, and so on, body sense power, we won't be able to find it there. Sense powers are form, a subtle kind of form. Actually, they're not visible to our naked eye. It says sense powers can only be known by clairvoyance. Somebody who's developed clairvoyance or super knowledge can actually perceive the sense powers. So I suppose it's a little hard to look into the sense powers to find if the mind is there. You need a quite highly developed mind to be able to look for them there. Also, mind itself is not something physical, so it's not something that can be seen with any of our five senses. Again, it's only a super knowledge, mental, what's it called? Clairvoyance or super knowledge that's developed on the basis of calm abiding, that's able to see the mind directly. But we can still know our mind by introspection, using introspection to look at our own mind, to look at our experiences, and slowly get more familiar with our mind in that way. And then the objects, he says forms and so forth. So forms means like visual forms and and so forth includes sounds and smells and tastes and tangible objects like heat and cold. So if we look in those objects and try to find the mind, we cannot find it. And also, we cannot find in between. So in between our sense power, like eye sense power, and the object seen, like a rose. So in the space in between those, can we find mind there? So he says, if we do this kind of investigation, we cannot find it anywhere inside our body, or outside of our body, or anywhere else. We cannot find a truly existing mind. So this is a difficult point. They talk about this in Mahamudra. When you study Mahamudra and practice Mahamudra, this is part of it, is to look for the mind. And if you do this successfully, you won't find it. But again, it's conventionally existent. It does exist conventionally, but not in an inherent, independent way. The next verse, 103, says, "It is not the body, it is not other, it is not mixed with it, nor is it at all separate from it. It is not in the slightest. Therefore, a sentient being is a natural nirvana." Wow, what does that mean? So this verse is saying the mind is not mixed with the body, in the body, nor is it separate from the body. So it doesn't exist inherently at all, anywhere, even the slightest. And then the last line about natural nirvana. Natural nirvana refers to emptiness. And Thupten Jinpa's translation of this verse is a little different. It says, he says, sentient beings have nirvana by their nature. So that makes more sense than saying a sentient being is natural nirvana. The nature of sentient beings is emptiness, emptiness of inherent existence. And that emptiness can be called natural nirvana. So what it means is when sentient beings can realize their nature of emptiness of inherent existence, then they will be able to attain nirvana. So that's the meaning. So emptiness isn't somewhere out in space, it's right here. It's where we are. It's the nature of our body, the nature of our mind, the nature of our eye. So this is where we look. This is where we look for emptiness, or where we realize emptiness. We examine our body and our mind and our eye and discover that they don't exist inherently. We can't even find one tiny particle that is inherently existing or truly existing. So this is where we discover emptiness, where we realize emptiness. And when we realize emptiness, then we can achieve nirvana, liberation. And His Holiness, in his commentary, Practicing Wisdom, he says, although we know that consciousness exists, consciousness or mind exists, if we analyze it and try to find it, either in the earlier moments of consciousness or later moments of consciousness or anywhere else, the idea of consciousness as a unitary entity begins to disappear, as it does when we analyze our body. And through such analysis, we arrive at the absence of inherent existence of consciousness. We realize it doesn't exist inherently. Okay, the next verse, 104, says, if the consciousness existed before the object of knowing, through observing what would it be produced? So here it's analyzing previous and later. Earlier we were looking for it in the body and outside the body and so on. So now we're looking for it over time. Did it exist before the object that is known or after the object is known, and so on. If the consciousness and the object of knowing are simultaneous, through observing what would it be produced? So this verse is saying, does the consciousness exist before the object that it knows? So when we look at a rose, we see a rose, we have the eye consciousness, visual consciousness seeing a rose. Does the eye consciousness exist first and then the rose exists afterwards? So that's not possible because the object has not yet arisen. At least we say in the moment, the rose we're seeing in one single moment, that rose hasn't yet arisen. That moment of rose hasn't arisen yet in the moment before the conscious, in the moment before it exists. So it can't be known. So the consciousness exists one moment before, cannot know the object existing one moment later. And then if they are simultaneous, if subject and object are simultaneous, then they could not be cause and effect. Because the object is always said to be the condition, one of the conditions for the mind that knows it. And the next verse is looking at the mind that exists afterwards. So 105 AB, first two lines. Well then, if it exists after the object of knowing, from what is consciousness produced at that time? So if we're looking for consciousness that arises after an object, after the moment of that object, the object has already ceased. So the object existing in moment A ceases in moment B, so the consciousness in moment B cannot know that object because it's already ceased. So what is the mind aware of? Actually, this is how it occurs conventionally. The mind in moment B knows the object in moment A because the object in moment A is the cause for the mind in moment B. So conventionally, that's how it does happen. However, this would not be possible if we're talking about an inherently existing object, an inherently existing consciousness, because if things are inherently existing, they can have no connection, no relation. They can't be dependent on each other. So it's analyzing that. So as His Holiness said, what we're looking for is a unitary, inherently existing, independently existing consciousness. When we try to find that, either in the moment before the object, or the moment after the object, or the moment simultaneous with the object, then we cannot find it. It will disappear. So we arrive at the understanding of consciousness as empty of inherent existence. It's difficult, this one, so don't worry if it doesn't make sense, but this is what Shantideva is saying, and it's something we need to think about and meditate on. Okay, so this last two lines of verse 105 is talking about the fourth close placement of mindfulness, the close placement of mindfulness of phenomena. That means everything else. So it says, in this way, production of all phenomena is not to be realized. So what this means is, if we use this kind of analysis that's just been explained and apply it to all other phenomena, we will come to understand all phenomena do not exist inherently, independently. They are not inherently produced, so they are empty of inherent existence. So that's just going briefly through these verses about the four close placements of mindfulness, and these enable us to understand all phenomena, body, feelings, minds, the primary minds, and all other phenomena as being empty of inherent existence. So the next part of the text we're going to skip over, and it deals with objections to what Shantideva has said and how he replies to them, how he answers them. So as I said, I thought it would be nice, auspicious, if we read the last section, the last verses of the text, because His Holiness said they are good to read. And there's actually not much commentary to them. They're just more verses about the benefit of understanding emptiness and also connecting emptiness with compassion and bodhicitta, how the two go together. So they're inspiring us, however difficult it may be to understand emptiness, but to keep working at it. So if you could open your text, the text that contains the verses, the root verses. It should be number 01, Shantideva's chapter 9 with outline. And it's on page 26 of that. So verse 9.151. So we'll read these verses together. In things which are empty in this way, what attainment is there? What loss is there? Who will be honored or despised by whom? Where does happiness or suffering come from? What is there to be displeased about? What is there to be pleased about? When searched for in thusness, what craves and what does it crave for? Upon analysis, what is this transitory support of the living that will die here? Who will arise and who has risen? Who is an associate, also who is a friend? May those who are like me apprehend all as being like space. Those who desire happiness themselves by means of the causes of conflict and delight are agitated and joyful. They live miserably through sorrow, struggles, disputes, cutting and stabbing each other, and negativities. After repeatedly going to the good migrations and enjoying much happiness again and again, they die and fall into the sufferings of the bad migrations, which are unbearable for a long time. There are many pitfalls in cyclic existence. Without reality there, like this, there is mutual contradiction. Therefore, there is no such thusness in cyclic existence. Transcend the limits of the ocean of suffering, which is incomparable and unbearable also there. Transcend the limits of the ocean of suffering. Strength is weak there, and the lifespan is short there as well. There too, in activities for long life and health, in hunger and fatigue, in sleep and detriment, and likewise in meaningless associations with the childish, life passes by swiftly without purpose. Discrimination is very difficult to gain there. How could there be a method to overcome habitual distractions there? There too, Maras strive in order that one falls into the great bad migrations. There, wrong paths are abundant, and doubt is difficult to overcome. Leisure is hard to gain again. The arisal of a Buddha is extremely rare. The river of afflictions will be difficult to abandon. Alas, suffering flows. These abiding in the river of suffering, who, although suffering immensely in this way, do not see their own suffering. Woe, they are pitiful. It is just like one who repeatedly washes himself and then enters fire again and again. So he prides himself in being happy, although he abides in immense suffering. Those abiding like this, behaving as though there is no aging and death, first they are killed and then go to the unbearable bad migrations. Thus, when might I pacify those tormented by the fire of suffering with the rain of accumulations of happiness, springing forth excellently from the clouds of my merit. When shall I respectfully collect the accumulation of merit in a manner of non-objectification and teach emptiness to those ruined by objectification? So he's talking about all the different kinds of sufferings that sentient beings go through in samsara, and this helps us generate strong compassion. And then the means to help them be free of all these sufferings, get them out of these sufferings, is to generate the wisdom realizing emptiness. And that way we can get ourselves out of samsara, free ourselves from all suffering and its causes, and then be able to help others to do the same. So although it's difficult to understand, it takes time and energy, lots of merit and purification, but it's well worth doing. And actually, one of the questions that had come in was about that. Why is emptiness difficult? And a few people, somebody also mentioned that it's kind of discouraging that only Aryas are able to directly realize emptiness. And who are these Aryas anyway? Can your neighbor be an Arya, or does it have to be somebody like His Holiness? So, yeah, emptiness is difficult because it's the opposite to the way we have always seen things, not just in this lifetime, but all our past lives as well. We've never had the chance to really see emptiness. And instead, we see things in the opposite way all the time. Everything that appears to our mind, to any of our 6 types of mind, it appears just the opposite to emptiness. It appears to be truly existing, inherently existing, independently existing. And we're just like totally hypnotized, totally, focused on that in a trance, in a way, like entranced by apparent inherent existence, which actually doesn't exist. So it's very hard to break through that, very hard to change that. And, even to get an intellectual understanding of it is not easy. It's very deep and complex. And just to give you some idea, in the Tibetan monasteries, the monks and nuns study emptiness. First they study for about 12 years, more kind of basic information, basic text and so on. And then they study emptiness for about 4 years using Chandrakirti's text, the Majjhimika Avatara, with commentaries. 4 years devoted to studying emptiness. And then I know a few who've done that kind of study, and I would ask them, so now do you understand emptiness? They say, no. So even all those years of study, they could be just being very humble. I'm sure they understand it better than most other people, but to really understand emptiness is very difficult. It's not easy. But it also depends on individuals, like what kind of imprints we already have in our mind from past lives. So if you've already studied emptiness a lot in past lives and you develop quite a good understanding of it, then in this life you might be able to understand it quite quickly. So, yeah, everyone is different and everyone has different imprints and they put in different amounts of time and energy. So it just depends on many different factors, causes and conditions. But it is very, very important to study, however difficult we might find it, because it is the only way out of suffering, the only way to be free of suffering and its causes once and for all, and be able to help others be free of suffering as well. But also, just like a cautionary note, sometimes there are people who say that they've realized emptiness. And you might meet people like that or hear people like that. Maybe they advertise on Facebook or whatever, I have realized emptiness, I'm an Arya. But just because somebody says they've realized emptiness doesn't mean they have. And in fact, I tend to believe if somebody says they've realized emptiness, they probably haven't. Because the people who really have a good understanding of it are very, very humble and very discreet about it. They're not going to advertise it. So, yeah, just be cautious about that. And I guess the one way you could know if somebody has a good understanding or a realization of emptiness is by the way they behave. The behavior should be really, really good, really ethical. Like they're really careful about refraining from non-virtuous actions like killing, stealing, and so forth, and very considerate of others, not doing things harmful or disturbing to others. And yeah, just showing a lot of really, really good qualities. And in your own case, if you think you get some experience and you think, I realized emptiness, it's good to check with someone, to check with a Lama to make sure if that's true. Lama who's got a really good knowledge and understanding of emptiness, and have a talk with them. Because I've heard sometimes that happens. People think they've got a realization of emptiness and they'll go and talk to a Lama, and the Lama will say, no, you haven't got it. Whether you believe the Lama or not is another thing, but yeah. And also this, if this kind of mind comes up that says, why does it have to be so difficult? I want it to be easy. I was trying to remember, there was some story, I think, Venerable Shunya, you might, when His Holiness was teaching somewhere in the States and somebody asked a question about what's the easiest way to get enlightened. And His Holiness cried. Yeah, so some person in an audience here in America asked the Dalai Lama this question: what's the fastest way, the easiest way to reach enlightenment? And His Holiness cried.
He just put his head in his hands and
wept. Yeah. So it's good to look at that kind of mind that says, I want the fast way, I want the easy way, I don't want it to be difficult. Where's that coming from? Of course, it's natural. We always want the easiest way, but in terms of spiritual practice and spiritual development, there isn't an easy way, there isn't a fast way. We just have to accept it is hard, it is difficult. But it's worth it. It's worthwhile.
I have a personal comment is that I've had this same question for years, and then the longer I practice the Dharma, the longer I live here in community with Venerable, I realize that I've got so much in my mind that would have to be clear to be able to really have that understanding. And in the past while, I've been beginning to really understand what the accumulation of merit and purification is about. I don't have the wherewithal, even right now, my mind, because it is so clouded. I can get some sense every once in a while. But as years go on, as I start getting more sincere about clearing the decks of all the garbage, if anything, it's not like it's coming, but I know that that's a huge step to this. The doing the good deeds and having the kind heart and learning about the 6 far-reaching practices. I thought that I could slide through that and just apply myself mentally, but there's too much in the way, so, and also to the depth of how deep the ignorance really is, the amnesia, the forgetting all the effort you put into something. If you don't keep at it, it just goes away. It's just, so I think the reality when we get into this impatience and saying, look at what we've got in the way. And that's where I get a lot more of my humility and less of my arrogance about, sooner or later. But it's been a real eye-opener on how they are.
Yeah, and also, even though emptiness is essential and important and so on, I was thinking it's almost like the top of the pyramid. And we have to build up the foundation. So even though we do need to put time and energy into learning about emptiness, but we also need to put a lot of time and energy into learning the more basic things. The Lam Rim, the Four Noble Truths, practices to build up our positive energy and purify our negativities and so on. So that's also really important, and that will also contribute to our understanding of emptiness. We have to understand how things do exist conventionally, in a correct way, like cause and effect, and, you do bad things, you're going to have problems, you do good things, you're going to have success. So, starting from there, and refuge, and so on and so forth, there's so much, that serves as a kind of foundation for the understanding of emptiness. So we need to put, probably most of our energy into those things, get those things really firm. Put some time into thinking about, learning about, meditating on emptiness. Don't just totally leave that aside, but also don't neglect the other things and only focus on emptiness, because that won't work either. But of course, most people, like ordinary people, have lots of other things to do. You have your job, you have your family, and so on. So limited amount of time, but whenever you can, put some time into daily practice and do retreats, join Abbey retreats and so forth. Any questions here? Otherwise, I have plenty from people following online. So one question that had come in was, how does mind-object duality apply to the I versus the other person? Not completely sure what they're asking, but just what came up in my mind as a response. When we see another person or think of another person, that, we do have a mind, and that's the subject, and then the other person would be the object. So there is this subject-object duality. That's just normal. And because our mind is influenced by things existing inherently, ignorance, believing things to be inherently existing, then, it seems like there's an inherently existing I over here and an inherently existing person over there. So that's, the normal appearance of things. So they appear as if we are totally separate and cut off and independent, but in fact, we are not. With regard to other people, we are interdependent. One way is simply mind and object always depend on each other. You can't have a mind without an object, and you can't have an object without a mind. Object is perceived by mind. So that's one way they are interdependent. But also, like in terms of bodhicitta, compassion and love and so on, we contemplate how we are interdependent in the sense that our very existence depends on others. We wouldn't exist without others. Our parents bring our body into the world. Other people produce the food that we eat and so on. So there's that kind of interdependence. And contemplating that is really helpful to cultivate compassion and love and bodhicitta and so forth. So in one way we are different. There is an I over here and an other over there, but not totally different, not totally cut off and separate and able to exist independently. So I know there's just lots of different ways you could think about that and look at that. Subject-object duality. Yeah, I think I don't have time to go through all these questions, so I do apologize. Oh yeah, maybe this question would be good. Of all the different prayers we have learned, what is good to add to our daily recitation? So this is something practical for after the retreat ends. So I think it's really up to each person. There's no one way of doing prayers and practices that everybody should do. So it depends on different factors, like how much you know, how much you've studied, how much time you have. Some people might be able to do hours of prayers and practices every day. Other people may only have 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So, if you feel connected with the Tara practice that was done during the retreat, you could continue doing that every day. That contains a lot of really good prayers, refuge and bodhicitta, 4 immeasurables, and so on. And if you don't have time to do the whole practice, you could, skip some of the prayers, like the 21 praises. You don't have to do that every day. And the one about the 8 dangers, you don't have to do that. So the main part is visualizing Tara and doing the preliminary prayers, and then doing the purification, light coming into you from Tara and reciting the mantra, really feeling like you're purifying your karma and your afflictions and so on, and receiving her blessing and energy. So that's a really important part to do. Don't skip that. And then if you have time to do some Lamrim meditation, that's good too. And then dedication. So that's a good practice to do. There's also the practice of Shakyamuni Buddha, which is in, I didn't do it here, but it's in one of the prayer books. You can get that off from the website. And you could also just connect with one of the Abbey residents or Venerable Children and just ask for personal advice. You could say, well, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is how much time I have, and they could give you sort of personal advice tailored to your where you're at and what your needs are and so on. Yeah, and keep doing more, the Abbey is offering lots of classes, and I'm sure Venerable Chini will give a talk about this, what's coming up in the future courses and so on. So in this retreat, we've just had a relatively short amount of time to look at a very difficult topic of emptiness. And so if you feel you're still confused and lost, that's not surprising. It takes a long time. I've been working on this for 45 years, more than 45 years, and still, a lot of difficulties dealing with emptiness. So it is something that takes time. So just give yourself more time, more energy to pursue this study.